opportunity for world leadership. For many other countries are in the same plight that we were in. A considerable part of the world has followed us already. We may be able to make ourselves the center of a new international currency system, including the whole of the empire and much of the rest of the world. But if we are to achieve this, we must free ourselves from the bondage of old ideas.
John Maynard Keynes grew up against a background of the old ideas. His achievement was to change those ideas, but to preserve their setting. We've seen that it is intellectuals, not deprived and exploited workers, who make revolutions. It's why conservatives, quite rightly, view intellectuals with suspicion. Keynes was the author of what we now call the Keynesian Revolution. A comfortable origin here in the Cambridge academic world, then Eton, then back here at King's, then the civil service, then life as a young Cambridge Don. None of this sounds very much like the making of a revolutionary. The trouble is with the word revolution. His was a revolution designed not to change, but to conserve. Keynes believed that depressions and unemployment were destroying the world that he so much approved, and he sought to end them. And he sought also to end the traditional remedies for depression and unemployment, wage cuts, price cuts, public belt tightening, because these did not work and were as painful as the disease they were aimed to cure. Keynes's revolution, in other words, was something very odd. It was a conservative revolution designed to save the existing system. And Keynes was, in fact, what shall we say, an activist conservative. This was not how Keynes was perceived in his time. His disciples, I was one, liked to think of themselves as radicals. To this day, some of his aging followers still cling to that lovely thought. Keynes was born in 1883. His mother was a diligent community leader, and his father, John Neville Keynes, an economist, was the chief administrative officer of Cambridge University. Keynes, here watching the May races, had a completely happy boyhood, and likewise later. Keynes never sought to change the world out of personal discontent. For him, it was excellent. When he was finished with Cambridge in 1905, Keynes sat for the civil service examinations, and he did badly in economics. The examiners, he said, presumably knew less than I did. But this handicap was not fatal, and he went to the India office, where he relieved his boredom by writing on Indian currency and the laws of probability. Soon he returned to Cambridge, still the Cambridge of Edwardian England. Here in training was the newest ruling class. Not workers, not capitalists, not the old landed aristocracy, but the Mandarins, the intellectual elite that would occupy the real seats of power in Westminster. When the war came, Keynes was not attracted to the trenches. He went instead to the Treasury. And he quickly learned how to guide, drive, and succeed in the wartime bureaucracy. At the war's end, he was one of the most eminent of the Mandarins. He was, accordingly, a natural choice for the British delegation to the peace conference, and that, from the official view, was a bad mistake. Mandarins should be manageable, and Keynes was not. The armistice brought relief from debt, and very soon there was hope of relief from debt. Germany should be made to pay. The mood in Paris, vengeful, myopic, indifferent to economic reality, horrified Keynes, and so did the civil servants, and so especially did the politicians. In June, he resigned and came home. He proceeded to compose the greatest polemical document of modern times. It was against the Versailles Treaty and against the Carthaginian peace. The Economic Consequences of the Peace was published before the end of 1919. A modern publisher would have taken another year and got it out for the Christmas market in 1920. This was the message of the book. Europe would only punish itself by exacting or trying to exact more from the Germans than they had the practical capacity to pay. Restraint by the victors was not a matter of compassion, it was a matter of elementary self-interest. Keynes also contributed his impressions of the men who were writing the piece. Of Woodrow Wilson, he said, "This blind and deaf Don Quixote." Of Clemenceau, he had one illusion, France, and one disillusion, mankind. His observations on Lloyd George were more severe. How can I convey to the reader who does not know him any just impression of this extraordinary figure of our time, this siren, this goat-footed bard, this half-human visitor to our age from the hag-ridden magic and enchanted woods of Celtic antiquity? No man is of perfect courage. Keynes deleted this passage on Lloyd George at the last moment. The judgment of the British establishment was rendered by the Times. Mr. Keynes, it said, may be a clever economist. He may have been a useful Treasury official. But in writing this book, he has rendered the Allies a disservice for which their enemies will be doubtless grateful. Causing pain to the British establishment, not joy to the enemy, was, of course, Keynes's real crime. But this the Times did not say. Keynes had broken the code, and so he suffered the penalty. For the next 20 years, he headed an insurance company, speculated in shares and commodities and foreign exchange, sometimes losing, but mostly winning. And he also speculated, fortunately with success, for King's College, of which he became the bursar. But henceforth on government matters he was an outsider, not a man to be trusted. While he was at Cambridge, Keynes had been a member of a group of ardent young intellectuals. One of these was Lytton Strachey, the most brilliant of stylists, and another was Leonard Woolf, writer, publisher, and Virginia Woolf, and Vanessa Bell, the painter. They now recreated themselves in London as the famous Bloomsbury Group. All had been much under the influence of the philosopher G.E. Moore. Keynes once told what he had from Moore. It was the belief that the appropriate subject of passionate contemplation and communion were a beloved person, beauty and truth, and that one's prime objects in life were love, the creation and enjoyment of aesthetic experience, and the pursuit of knowledge.